You are listening to Kitco Roundtable. I'm your host, Michael McCrae. I'm happy to be with us Cooper Quinn, who was formerly running a junior focus on Canada's East Coast and now has joined CO2Lock, a company focused on carbon sequestration. Cooper, welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here, Michael.
Carbon sequestration bubbles up once and again. I remember that Canada Nickel, Mark Selby's company, they put out a news release about some rocks that can absorb CO2. There's been some scientific studies around as well, too. Tell us what CO2 is built up on there, Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Canada Nickel's release the other week there, the CO2Lock team found that pretty interesting. It's based on a lot of the same science, a lot of the same rocks and everything's like that. Canada Nickel and as well FPX Nickel, who we're a spin out of FPX Nickel, are really looking at the sequestration potential in tailings. And what we saw was taking that same science, that same research, all of kind of those same reactions that happen naturally, and then spinning that into standalone CO2 sequestration projects. So definitely similar tech, similar kind of rocks and research and things like that, but we're kind of taking it in a standalone different direction.
Maybe you could frame what is happening within carbon sequestration. What is the state of the business right now?
There's a lot happening. I think that's not news to anyone, even who isn't really focused on the sector at all. But you've got a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different avenues, and in what we look at as called the voluntary carbon market, which is where you see large scale emitters, big companies kind of like buying offsets, or the box you can check when you're flying somewhere. So that's the voluntary kind of offsets market, and it's very, very broad and encompasses a lot of different things, all the way from reforestation projects in Brazil and the Amazon to something potentially like what CO2Lock is doing, or forests in Washington or things like that. So that's all kind of within the carbon sequestration business. So you've got all these different threads on the nature-based solutions, but where we're looking is the geologic kind of side of things. We see a lot of potential for these very permanent solutions in the space. And there's been quite a bit of work done. There's a very successful project happening in Iceland right now in basalts with a company called Climeworks there. So basically they're pumping CO2-rich solutions down into the ground, which is also happening in Alberta. Difference being in Iceland, that CO2 becomes mineralized in those basalts with a specific type of olivines. So taking some of that thinking and moving it forward, where we're working on is the end goal is a similar process, but in a different rock type, in these ultramafic serpentinized peridotites, which is a bit of a mouthful. And the speed of reaction is significantly faster, and the sequestration potential of these minerals is quite a bit bigger. This kind of spans out of work that's been done in the tailings for these projects. As I mentioned earlier, BHP's Mount Keith mine in Australia has a lot of work done around it, and it's passively sequestering carbon into their tailings as it reacts with the atmosphere. And then there's another Vancouver-based company here called In Minerals, which has been receiving a lot of accolades these days. Greg Dippel's group out of UBC, as they won some X Prize funding, $1 million from Elon's X Prize there, which was big news. So we're taking some of that. There's been a lot of work between FPX and Greg Dippel's group and spinning that into standalone projects outside of the tailings world, as I mentioned there. And then, we're not the only ones looking at this or thinking about this. A lot of folks out there with these ultramafic mines are looking at this as a potential opportunity, as you mentioned Canada Nickel earlier there.
Now, there's a number of ways that you can sequester carbon. You can grow trees. I remember there was the scientist that was not making people happy when he was sprinkling iron ore filings on the ocean to make algae. What's the advantage of a mineral process, Cooper, compared to any of the other solutions?
Yeah, the nature-based solutions are great. Look, I think we all want more trees and reforestation, but ultimately the trees are finite. What we saw in Washington a few years ago was a large number of the offset forests that companies have planted burned down, and they do plant some insurance groves and things like that. But ultimately, that's that wasn't the best outcome, obviously. So where we look at it as what we can do with our sequestration technology is mineralizing that CO2, mineralizing that carbon. Basically, we're taking a magnesium hydroxide and making a magnesium carbonate. That is then stable for geologic time. So many more zeros on the potential stability of that. So it's out of the atmosphere more or less forever. And it's very verifiable as well. You can basically take it and you can weigh the total inorganic and carbon in these products and these rocks. And so we see a lot of real strong advantages on the verifiability and the permanence of that sequestration. Even on some of the reservoir-based solutions, you might have leakage through various cap rocks or through some of the historic wells that you see in Alberta and things like that. So potentially less permanent, but ultimately these kinds of mineralization technologies, be it ours or be it some of the ones that are happening in basalt, it is now stable for forever. So that seems to be a big advantage to me.
Cooper, how do you commercialize?
We're looking at a scale of a few years right now. Certainly, step one for us is going to be some pilot scale projects here in BC. Those will be ultimately on a cost per ton basis, probably reasonably expensive, but that's the nature of being pilot scale. And then look into the offset space and the offset world there. There's a lot of emitters here a lot of industries that are just going to be unable to reduce their emissions to the level that they've made commitments to reduce to, or will be required to reduce to based on the jurisdictions that they operate in. So we'll be selling those verifiable, very permanent offsets here at some point. And then as well, nice component of our business is some of the products that we actually will produce or will likely be saleable products, magnesium and calcium fertilizers, and then some road bases and things like that as well, because it is so permanent that once that product has been produced, you can kind of do whatever you want with it.
What audience do you have to talk to, Cooper, as you're kind of taking this idea forward? I mean, who do you need to be talking to, and who do you need to raise awareness with CO2Lock?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really low carbon and ESG focused funds out there these days, and those range from large scale funds like Brookfield raising $16 billion to much smaller kind of family offices that are really focused on low carbon innovation and technology innovation. So getting in front of all those folks right now has been part of my mandate. We've got a decent treasury at the moment, but we're not in a revenue generating portion of the business, so that's ever depleting. So always thinking about where how we continue to do all of the work that we need to do. But so it's those. Right now, it's all of those low carbon kind of focused funds and ESG focused funds. And like I said, they run the gamut from very large to very small across the board. And we're seeing more and more kind of spring up every day, as we talked about, where I think this is really increasing awareness in the minds of investors everywhere. And they're looking to, put their money places. And you could talk to RBC. If you have an advisor at RBC and you're, looking at your RRSPs, I'm sure they have a product that you could, that they're marketing to be more ESG focused or more low carbon focused. So you're seeing it across the board.
Let's turn to our number of the week. Cooper, guest always goes first. What's your number?
2. So there are 191 countries that have signed on to the net zero commitments in Paris there, and there are two countries in the world that are currently carbon neutral. So we got a ways to go.
What are the countries?
It's Suriname and I believe Bhutan.
I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, and I believe Suriname's actually net negative at this point in time, deforestation and things like that. And then I think kind of the next round of countries that have really committed to it are kind of some of the Scandinavian countries and some places like that, but they're not looking at I think full neutrality until like 2040 something. And I know Tasmania off the top of my head is also net neutral, but it's not a country.
Any milestones or updates you're planning over the next 12 months here, Cooper?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of technical milestones that we'll be planning to tick off here over the next 12 months. Kind of full steam on the R&D side of things as we look to, take the work that's been done, like I said, largely with Greg Dipple and the FPX work, and taking that into the standalone space, really looking at the waters associated with these deposits. A lot of the work to date has been really focused on the rocks. makes sense with all the tailings side of things. But we'll be looking a lot on the waters. So investors can, folks who want to follow the story, we'll be putting news out through FPX Nickel as well. Feel free. We're going through a big website update and everything like that. And they're always free to fire me an email at cooper@co2lockcorp.com or at cooperquinn_WY on Twitter. Try to make myself reasonably available for anyone who wants to chat.
Follow me at Michael McCrae. McCrae is with 2 C's, and Paul is Paul Harris Gold. If you like what you hear, tell a friend. Don't forget to subscribe. On behalf of Paul Harris, Cooper Quinn, myself, have a pleasant weekend.